My guest today is the multi-talented Violet Alexandre, Chief Revenue Officer of a new FinTech company called Bryllyant. I still say they named the company after her, but she tells us differently in our conversation. Violet is also my Clubhouse partner, and we chat every Monday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, collaborating and networking with other creatives. And best yet, she's 50% of a musical duo called Second Floor. She's a strong vocalist, very creative, and has a great passion for sales. Yes, you heard right, sales. I hope you enjoy our casual banter, as it's hard to have a, truly formal conversation with this effervescent personality called Violet.
It's interesting because having Jerry, when I was streaming and Jerry would be not here, it is that much harder to perform because there's no ability for interplay, and that's part of what makes it interesting. And it has to be completely scripted, and something's completely lost in that. So it's interesting.
That's interesting. Segue that, if you will, into the way that we've been trying to do business these days. I mean, because a lot of people are saying, I'm really stressed out because of having to actually do business on Zoom. What's your mindset?
Oh, interesting. I think I was very virtual longer than a lot of people. I've always worked remote. And so nothing about it really bothered me, in the sense that I was used to making cold calls to people in different ways. So like I would find, I have a story I could tell you years ago when we were pitching. So an earlier startup we had, we were pitching for investment, and I listened to a podcast, and there was someone who spoke on it that was an investor. And so I'm like, well, that's fair game. I'm going to reach out and cold call. So I cold called this individual, was able to kind of start a dialogue, and never in my life have met this person in person. And they've rewritten the narrative in their mind that we met, and through ongoing interaction. And so whether you're virtual or not, if you can find touch points, you can get to know people. So I have to be honest, it hasn't bothered me, really.
I liked, there was a real nugget of information in that one about, like, it's like giving someone the impression that they've known you, right? That's the secret right there, right? And tell us about the ways that you actually do that.
It's about dribbling in little delights, right? So, you don't have to give away everything. You have to have your own understanding of your comfort level with what you share, but it's finding those little things. So like, for instance, if I'm telling a story about myself, I find something where the other person can connect to it or get a little giggle. So for instance, I started out in sales really, really young. I was the first rep ever hired by Eli Lilly that was 20. So I'm 20 years old, and here's the funny nugget that is how I let people get to know me. I shared that, and it's true, they couldn't get my company car. Every drug rep had a company car, but not even Eli Lilly and Company could get me my company car because underwriting couldn't get that approved. And so I did get my car a year later, but it's something like that I share, that I feel like it lets people a little bit into who I am, aside from just the surface level. And I think when you do that, you're building authentic relationships. You're not keeping it so close to the vest that all they're getting is the business side of you or the picture perfect side of you, right?
Actually, it's a great little story because it actually has a quirky but a very realistic flavor to it, and it fills the void, the idea of somebody kind of relating to that. Like they're going, oh my God, I can actually feel myself actually in that state of mind, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, and I think that and those connections that you make with people, I mean, the other thing I think that I do sometimes is I find ways to like let other people share unique things about themselves with me. So for instance, on LinkedIn, and I mean, you were just responding to mine, right? So on Fridays, I do this thing and I change it up to different things, but a lot of times I do icebreaker questions, and I try to pick really interesting questions that then can start like letting me connect and understand who the other person is. So even though it's a professional platform, it doesn't mean you can't ask interesting questions that start an interesting conversation. So, I mean, like, well, what does it matter what your favorite scent is? Well, you know what? That's a really interesting insight into the other person. If somebody gives you the scent citrus, right? That's someone that likes to be energized, right? But if someone gives you the scent lavender, well, that's somebody that wants to be chilled out because they're probably stressed out. Maybe. No.
And it's so true. And actually, as part of my sort of entry with new clients, I take them through what I call them the simple 7. And I try to put them in a mind frame of a child. And I love what you do with your 2 boys, because, some people might look at that as being silly, but I can tell you right now that about 80% of the people that are viewing that thing are saying, you know what, we need to be more like that.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way. For me, I'm trying to introduce them to a little bit of my world, right? Because since I work for myself, and we have a family business, it's a situation where you're always working. And so that's really hard for a child to understand when their friends' parents aren't always working. So if you want to kind of bridge that gap, to me, it's like, well, get them involved and let them see what it is to be an entrepreneur, because it's not made for everybody, that's for sure. And I don't know that I ever thought that was in my DNA. But allowing them to see it also allows them to make decisions and think through their future. So that's why I think I do it. And it amazes me. They look forward to it now. It's their special thing to do, right, with me. Right. So no, actually they compete for it. They compete. Oh, whose week is it, right? I get a kick out of it.
I love that. That's fantastic, because that does create kind of a cool edge. And I've spoken to a number of women in particular, leaders in businesses and entrepreneurs. And one of the issues that they always have is that, and I think Christina Cleary messaged it or titled it very beautifully. She called it a lifestyle integration versus a balance, versus lifestyle balance, right?
Yeah, no, integrating it into and I think that COVID thrusts that on people, right? Which is kind of maybe good in a way. I think families were forced to spend more time together than ever before, and there's a positive and a negative side to that.
Yeah. Well, on the positive side, I think I've spoken with people who said I've never seen so much of my kids, and I'm now seeing values in them that I think I probably would have missed out if I'd have driven an hour to the office, an hour on home, and maybe they're, I get to maybe read a book with them and then they go to bed, right? That kind of thing. So.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like where you are, but things really opened up here, but I don't think that, based off of things that I'm watching and seeing, I don't feel that comfortable with that. So we've remained fairly insulated. But we have the luxury to do so. So, yeah.
We are at the stage now where professional services now, like personal services, have fully opened up. Indoor dining has opened up. I actually went out and celebrated my anniversary this past weekend, and it was 25% capacity. And you can see they've like literally removed tables, removed chairs, so that they're psychologically, amped to do just the right thing. It's like, we only have 3 boxes in this place anymore. So the minute they're filled, we're at capacity, by the new setting. So those things have happened, but I'm kind of with you because there's still an unknown factor. There's still some things coming in. There's still some variations that we haven't really had enough time to kind of take a look at. Not me personally, because I'm leaving it to the scientists to look after me. I'm not delving in and telling them what they should do like a lot of people are. I have no opinion. I have no opinion on science other than, let the scientists do it and tell us what, that's where I'm gonna stay. But I've actually enjoyed the new flavor of business. I think I was like this a long time ago anyway. It's just that I used to take a train ride or a car ride into Toronto, every couple of days to meet clients and to do some barnstorming or brainstorming, and it was fun, but I found I can do it just as well as we're having this conversation.
Yeah, honestly, you and I connected on LinkedIn, right? What a story when you really think, and when I was looking back to this last year of efforts that I put into LinkedIn, I have built like a network, just a community, I have a community, and none of them are situated anywhere remotely near me. I definitely have a Canada flair to my network, which I find so interesting. But you can gravitate to the people that you actually connect with, because I find, for instance, a lot of people have a creative spirit, but are not necessarily creative. And I found that a lot of the people that I've naturally connected with are creative spirits. I think of Meredith, right? She's a speech coach, but she's an actress, right? And I think of this community of people that has connected, and I think that's what's kind of beautiful about the whole remote aspect. And I hope someday that, I get to meet some of these people face to face. That would be nice. But in the meanwhile, this is working out okay. And honestly, for our entire team is remote, and the last year has been really good for us in so many ways. So I feel very fortunate. I know not everybody was so fortunate.
Well, there's a digital and a virtual side to your new business that probably feeds the need or the lack of need to be in person. Tell us a little bit more about that, if you will.
Well, so we've pivoted a lot. And I think that's the nature of what any kind of startup or small business environment, that you change and you shift. You have to be really nimble. Part of what I like about it. But so when COVID hit, we were actually in full software development company mode. We're completely a software development company, and doing a lot of work in the FinTech space. And here in the United States, the PPP loans, when they came through, there were a lot of challenges. And one of our biggest customers is a community bank who needed to overnight find a way to get these PPP funds effectively into the hands of small business owners. And they didn't have the technology infrastructure, and we essentially are their technology wing. So literally in 2 weeks' time, we had to code up these massive platforms so that they could process these funds. It had a huge impact because we did it successfully. And so our team grew, and our relationship with our FinTech clients kept getting more solidified. And so in that, we're also able to see opportunities in this space. And so while we still are a software development company, we have myself, who's a CRO, right? We have a marketing side to our business. And then we exposed, I mean, when you talk about small business owners, and there's a lot of stuff out there when they say business banking experiences, there's a lot of FinTechs popping up in this space. And are you just another one? And, you know, what I would say is part of our business is going to be building a better business banking experience. But right now we're doing a whole bunch of other things to support that, because we think being that means you should support business owners in other ways. So for instance, like there's tools that are needed by small business owners, like things like understanding how to do your budget effectively, doing calculations. So we're working on an academy project that will support those business owners. And I have a personal passion about personal branding, or personal professional branding. I've gotten more and more into that subject and interest. And we're working on a project in that space where, you know, we're going to try to create a tool in that space. All these things, free tools and resources. And I think it's part of a bigger picture, right? That we want to support the entrepreneurial community. And having been there and done that, both myself and the CEO, we know that what we needed wasn't always there, and we'd like to help build it.
I liken it to a support ecosystem that some of the larger SaaS companies have actually built around them, made up generally of partners who had the skill set to bring some, you know, certain flavor of support to the table. So kudos to you for kind of like thinking through that, and in a sense, kind of imitating some of the bigger players, because the world's pretty flat. You know, we can pretty much get to one another at the other end of the world, you know, quite easily over a call. And so it's important that they see that, you know, yeah, you may be new, but you've thought it out, and you are, and, you know, and you've thought of all the elements, and you've got the packages, and you've got the help available.
Well, I think something interesting that you said recently that really got in my head is all about, you know, so many people suffer from imposter syndrome, right? So many people are afraid to get out there and step up and say anything because they don't think they're big enough yet, or they're not substantial enough yet, or they're whatever. You can if yourself to death, right? And you'll never get anywhere. So if you're open to being nimble, you can get out there, and you can get out there, and that message can change in the future. You're not going to be in trouble if you make a decision to change it down the road. You are you, and show you, right? And I think a lot of organizations have kind of like discouraged their employees to be out there, the bigger companies, right? And I think that's going to have to shift on its head, because those employees can exactly help you further solidify trust in your business. So if you want your big business to be as successful as nimble startups and small businesses, you have to empower employees to get out there and be out there, because that's what makes them special, and that's what makes them a special part of your team.
I learned a long time ago in retail operations that, you know, me, the driver, the operations manager, the guy sitting and floating around the place, and was not that important. The most important individual was the person on the floor in the face of the customer. And if they were not an ambassador of how I felt about the business and how and the theme and the feeling that we wanted to provide our customers with, if they were not in sync with that and couldn't demonstrate that, I mean, they were going to be my weakest link. So I needed to empower them. I needed to give them the permission to be as creative as possible. Like, because in all honesty, I used to actually even also say, look, if the call comes to me, this is going to be the decision. I would have much rather you made it at your level and not have that call come to me and waste my time.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. Whatever experience down the line, anywhere within an organization, whether you're talking to somebody that's a customer service representative all the way up to the CEO, that experience should be the same, because the values that are instilled in the business should come through everybody. And I think, that's really hard to do. You need a really good leader to do that, and you need a really transparency, right? And I think more than anything this past year, people started to demand that, or they went out on their own. There's so many people who've gone out on their own for that very reason. And people learned that, I can do this. And there was no choice. So a lot of people did. Yeah. And the other thing I find interesting, because on LinkedIn, people are always thinking I'm trying to sell them something. It happened to me today. Someone made a connection for me. David connected me with someone because he thought the person could benefit from what I know in sales, because the person's struggling with sales. And the introduction was made, and the assumption that was received, even I reached out just to connect, and I said, hey, I'd love to be a resource to you. And the assumption was, oh, I'm sorry, I can't pay you. And I said, I'm not charging anything. I literally really authentically find interest in sales and marketing. And I would like to give it back where I can, where it makes sense, specifically with, independent consultants, small business owners. And I'm not selling you anything, so please. But I think that really says something about our society and, the assumptions that are constantly made. And sales isn't a dirty word, but I grew up with that mindset too. So, yeah. Yeah,
no, I think it's an old mindset that hasn't quite left the planet. I'm not sure that it's actually going to eke away. It'll die away eventually as the new breeds take over. But selling is it's an important aspect of our business, because we all have to. But I think much like yourself, I've taken a different seat at the table. Most people think I'm a creative marketing type. I'm actually not. And I actually tell them, you know what? I said, I'm glad you see me that way, because that's less troublesome to the equation, right? The way I see it. Because while you're thinking of me as a creative and a marketing type, you're not expecting me to close you, in a sense. And I'm upfront about that, right? But see, that tells them everything they need to know about the situation. That's what I believe. And that kind of authenticity, that kind of honesty about my quirky personality kind of clicks. And you're a little bit like that. I sense that about you.
Well, I've always, the whole quirky thing comes out in almost every nuance of my life, because, and I realized this so when I sing on Thursday, the songs that we choose, we tend to wane sad and melancholy, and even when I think about Jerry, right? Jerry is quirky. And then I think back to, I don't know if you know this, but this is the truth. I was voted quietest in high school. I was seen as the most introverted, quiet person. And what I realized, and this was a realization early on, that if I didn't figure out how to overcome that I didn't think I was going to succeed in life. And so I played a little game with myself that I was going to act. So I said, you know what? Since I don't think I can do this, but I like to act, I am going to act as though I am this outgoing person until I learn it to be so. And so, you know, people will say, fake it till you make it, and they don't like that phrase. Well, I didn't really look at it that way. I wasn't faking it till I made it. I was teaching myself how to embrace it. And so anybody out there that's like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm introverted, I can't do this, I can't do that. Well, no, it can be learned. Anything can be learned, and it's about how you're going to go about that process.
Totally. It's the truth. I've had some really spectacular clients where the CEO has been a total introvert. You know, you'll never find him on stage. You'll never find him on a Zoom call. You never find him giving a keynote, you know, and I've been able to kind of like help him speak and help showcase an element of his life or her life where somebody came in and helped them up because they said, oh, I really like that value about you. And often I would start that kind of conversation by saying, look, I love how deep a thinker you are. I love how strategic you are. When you say something, it's crisp. It's well thought out. Like, oh my God, I would kill for that skill set. And most people would. So we are going to use your talents where I need to describe something that's going on inside the organization. Only you can do it. And all of a sudden they became kind of softly color commentary types to the organization. And it wasn't long before they were going, oh, I think I'll do an audio. Oh, maybe we'll do a video, right? Or do one in a conversational kind of way where I put the camera to one side so they don't feel like they don't see the red light blinking, you know, and they don't feel stressed. And I've got my remote control under the desk as I'm asking them a question, and I click on and click off, you know, so that they don't know when it's on, they don't know when it's off, and get some amazing material. And it surprises themselves too. But I love what you just said, that you actually teach yourself that new activity, that new language of doing business. Very good.
Well, I think it's about practice. It's like anything else. And if you can give yourself enough opportunities to practice, you still feel nervous. You know what? I didn't think I would feel nervous, but right before I logged on for this, I'm like, oh, I feel that little tang of nervousness. It never, you know, that's what keeps you on your toes, right? You never want to get so caught up in yourself that you don't get nervous, because it's that little bit of nervousness that takes you just that little bit up a notch, right? And I think that more than ever, it's important to, you know, practice your message, whatever your message is, right? And from a personal standpoint, like any individual should have their own message. And it should be rehearsed. Why? Because rehearsing it, and this is something I know from music, it's not until it's completely memorized that you can nuance it in different ways for different audiences. So, you know, with music, you do that by memorizing it so well that you can then play with it however you want. Well, it's the same thing with your message of who you are. You have to sit back and know it so well that then you know, what do I pull out for who and why and when? And that's something that, like, if I were going to give someone a success tip, my success tip is get your personal story down so good that it doesn't matter who you're talking to, that you know which pieces to pull from.
You know, most messages that we have, people won't believe this, but there's actually on a sort of an algorithmic equation to most messages that we have. And most of them tend to break down into 3 to 6 variations that you can come in and enter and exit dependent on the situation that you are. But you have to be good on your feet. And the only way you can count on yourself to be good on your feet is to know this damn thing inside out. So I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely been one of my things. It's like one of these mantras I think I share with everybody. And I think the other thing that's, you know, I know you're a lot in the content game like I am. I'm constantly creating content. People actually don't like to be jarred. In other words, like they want to understand what they're going to expect from you, and they don't really want it to change. And it took me some time to really fully appreciate that. Like, I have a cadence of what I will share on what days in a certain way. And you know what? People expect to see that from me. And if I'm going to change something, I start to tell them before I do it, because people don't like things they're not familiar with. So I think even from a business marketing standpoint, once you develop your cadence, you have to be really careful that you consistently contribute that same type of content and don't stray too far. You can start to introduce new things. And I remember when I started introducing video at first, I thought, oh boy, but you know what? It's important to get your face out in front of people. And so I did it. I don't like to put the reason. It's so funny because the kids record me. We don't like to put their faces, you know, just from a safety perspective out. So they're on the other side talking for that reason.
Yeah.
So
no, I think you know, gone are the days when the business could just willy-nilly go the way of a path that it wanted to, without consideration of its audience. There's been such a blending over the years, and you know, it's by design, so that we can't really tell at this point who the audience is and who the who the service provider is, because at some given time, even the people that are running the company are an audience of are among the audience someplace else. So you cannot get away from the fact they're a human being. You know, I don't know, at least I haven't found that you can do that. And at some time in your life, you're going to need to purchase something, or you're going to need to think about something or consider something in order to fulfill a component of your life. So the sooner we start to let the audience kind of on stage with us a little bit more and get involved with us and make it a rock concert versus a rock show, then, you know, I think we're all going to be better off.
Well, it's interesting. You bring up something. So we actually realized that having built things before, you don't ever want to build something without having your audience involved, right? And you can do it in a variety of ways. But this time around, we decided to select some member advisors that are literally the exact type of individuals that would need what we have, and having them help us determine what we're going to build for them. We have our own ideas, but you know what? And I mean, most business people should think that way, but I think a lot of times when you're in the trenches and you're trying to get something done, you can forget that your most valuable resource is having a conversation with someone that would be using your service. Even if it's not the person that's ultimately going to make the purchase, but the lookalike person can tell you what you need to know. And I think we forget sometimes to get out of our own heads and get into the head of the other person, right? Because we all think we know so much sometimes, or at least we get in that zone. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Now, I made a joke of it a little bit, but I kind of meant it when I said that you named your company after you.
That was very sweet of you to say.
Well, I give it when it's earned. But the company name is Bryllyant. It's spelt kind of funky. I love the way it's spelt. But really, like, did it just come to you? Is it something you worked on? Tell us a little bit about the naming.
So the naming was definitely not from me. It was definitely straight from our CEO. I try to shy away from funny spellings because I think it makes it bad for SEO, but hey, whatever. There's also issues when you're trying to get domain names, right? And I think where the name really comes in, and I have to say, this is truly to the core. Like, you know, you have your core tenets, your core things, meeting and exceeding expectations and literally being excellent. So if I were to distill like a core value of the company, it's excellence. There's not a single person on our team that is not type A. I hate to even wane compulsive, if I were to be honest, and want everything to be perfect and excellent. And so I think that's why the name. And I think, you know, no, and the other piece is, the other part of being brilliant is you will make a mistake because we are human, but when you do, owning it and making it right. And so that's the other piece is, you know what, and this played out very early on. We launched the early access campaign and there was a broken link. And and we had tested and tested and tested, but still there was a broken link. And my entire day turned into how we were going to make that mistake right. And you know what? We decided to own the mistake and call it out because we want trust, right? And the best way to have trust is to be honest, own it, and make it right. So, you know, we did everything we could on the tech front to try to rescind it. We couldn't. And so we took steps to compose an email that went out saying, we realize you got an email with a broken link, but this is who we are and we're going to be honest with you. So, you know, I don't care what stage of your business you're at, that is probably the most important thing in my mind is just being true and being honest and owning it.
How far are you away from liftoff?
So I would definitely say it's probably going to be closer to the end of this year, like maybe December. As you know, with anything in the financial sector, there's so much regulation and compliance and everything has to be lock solid. So that's what I would say. And then if I'm really honest, because from a tech perspective, having launched multiple software projects, I always think people underestimate. So if developers are saying it's going to be then, it might be Q1 of next year, because let's just face it, it's hard to anticipate bugs and issues.
Could you share are you open to sharing kind of like the, say the Reader's Digest kind of view of the offering as to what the customers could expect, or is that something you'd rather keep a lid on at this moment?
I'd say I'd rather keep a lid on at this moment, but I would say that part of the reason for that is because of the involvement we have of people that will shape the product. So, you know, yeah, wireframes are done, but there's going to be testing and implementation that will change it. And I imagine anything I would say today would probably be 50% different by the time we launch.
I appreciate that. I actually have an appreciation for that, because, you know, I'm not that far removed from that kind of working environment. And in fact, you know, a lot of my clients actually work in that space, and we're very careful about, you know, what we'll like put out. Press releases are a very funky thing, right? You know, and I end up having to go and get approvals up the yin yang, as they say, in order to break news, you know, to the world. So I really do have an appreciation for that. No worries. On on a more personal side, I mean, you obviously do set some real quality time to one side for your family, for yourself, and for your music. And I've got people watching you, and actually they've even spoken to me and said, how does she do that? Like, how does she just, like, she's a mom, she's running a company, she's out there on social, she's banging it, she's on Clubhouse, she's on, like, how does she do that? Do you have an answer for those people?
Well, I time block. You know what? I do. I time block, and I'm very strict about my time blocks because every day I have a certain set of things that are priorities, and I say, okay, they're going to go on my list, and I'm going to spend that amount of time. And something I learned that I think that I used to have this fallacy in my mind that you need these huge, like, I'll give you an example, marketing projects. For me, I used to have this idea that for a marketing project, I needed 3 hours of uninterrupted time to bang and actually get it together. I had this in my head, and it would hold me back from completing that thing. That thing would keep going to the next day, the next day, the next day. And then I realized that, you know what? I wonder what would happen if I only used 10 minutes and applied it to that. What could happen? Could I do something in 10 minutes and really move the needle forward? And I started saying, I'm going to try it. And guess what? The truth is, even if I only have 10 minutes to allocate to that thing on the list, 10 minutes will still get me that much further. And then sometimes when I've shared this tip before, and someone will ask me, well, what if you don't achieve anything in that 10 minutes? It has not happened to me. Because you know what? If you sit there and you only have 10 minutes, you let yourself free of, well, I'll get done what I can. And that removes this barrier. And then the other thing I'll say is I do a lot of multitasking. I know people say multitasking is not good. I don't agree. For instance, I memorize my lyrics. So all the lyrics that I memorize while I'm working out. So that way I am doing 2 things at once effectively. Because I've learned the other thing about memorization, and this is a kind of a really big tip for people trying to memorize content, is when you're moving, it actually helps the kinesthetic side, helps your brain connect with the stuff you're trying to memorize. And so I'm that much more efficient that way. So those are my ways: time blocks and multitasking.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Very closely aligned with some of the work, that I do, in the fact that I, get up early, go like clear the head, go like do something like totally ridiculously mine, throw yourself into the universe kind of thing. And like, it's amazing by the time that first hour is finished, where I've, worked out, gone for a walk, felt the air against my skin, had a cup of coffee. Like, I like so fired up with like so many ideas. Like I gotta almost come in and throw them on the whiteboard right away, because it's driving me crazy. And I gotta do this major brain dump. And it's hard to realize that I actually gave that to myself. This is what's kind of like strange. And I think that's part and parcel of what you're talking about, is like being able to kind of like manage your energy more than manage your time, right?
And it gives you energy. Right. And if you do that, it feeds right into everything else. And so, and actually, if I'm stuck, or I'll do something like I'll take 10 minutes to sing if I'm stuck, because that changes, it shifts your energy. Then when you go back, it's like, oh, wait a minute, that thing I was stuck on, I'm not stuck on anymore. So totally agreed there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It really is. I find like the more that I speak to you, the easier you are to speak to. That I know that there's some familiarity that's growing between us. And I always say to my clients, like, that's what they should kind of head toward, right? And I almost put that a slant in my daily post. I actually don't say a lot of things. I say a lot of the same things in different ways and flavors, which we kind of addressed a little earlier on in our discussion. But that repetition and that constant connection with someone, it can actually be verbal and visual. It doesn't always have to be like in face with one another. And that's the point that I'm trying to make when I say that put yourself out there every day. I'm not saying run into the streets and start screaming, right?
No, I agree. And that's the other thing. I think people hold back because they think that, well, I'm just going to say the same thing everybody else is saying. Well, no, it's what's the unique thing you bring to that? How do you view it, right? Don't just tell me the same thing. Tell me what you think about it. People will care what you think about it. They want to know about your perspective, not necessarily even that they're going to agree. And I think sometimes people are also afraid of people to disagree. I would actually say welcome disagreement, because it's your opportunity to highlight who you are and your unique value that you bring to the world, right?
You've seen that in me. I even gave it, I loaded number 3 completely that way. And I knew that you would appreciate that, because sometimes actually I've noticed a bit of a setup on your part when you're actually communicating with your audience. It's like you almost tell them the negative thing up front so as to kind of break the ice for them and get them ready to hear your opinion, right?
Yeah, I think people, if you can take the barrier down by like showing them the thing that they're not going to agree with, and then say, but let me just have you look at this a little bit differently for a minute, right? It removes, they can't be like, oh, but they can't really rebut you at that point, because you already shared what their rebuttal would be. So it removes, and you know what, it actually, it's a relief for them as well, because you're allowing them permission to share that view. And I think, do you really need to give people permission? The reality is people are constantly seeking permission, and it's just human nature, I suppose. And so if you can grant permission in a non-confrontational way, there's a huge value to it.
It's sales 101, actually, believe it or not. In all honesty, I mean, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, oh my, like that itself is like a sales lesson, like the overcoming objections is that. Like, why put yourself in front of a wall if you can see the wall from 100 yards away? Like, tell everybody about the wall, like warn them, like, by the way, we're going to have this conversation in about 5 minutes from now. We're all going to meet up with this wall, but we're going to meet up with it together, and I actually can help you over that wall, because I'm going to put my hands down here and you can put your foot in and I lift you over it. I know that's kind of a goofy kind of metaphor, but the reality is that's exactly what we're doing, right, with people when we're having the great conversations. Absolutely.
And yeah, I think the other thing I would say about, like, I think sometimes going back to sales, and everyone's concerned about authenticity, and I'm not being authentic if I'm selling. Well, yeah, it depends on how you frame it, right? And you can be absolutely authentic if you're honest with who you're talking to, and if you want to understand what their challenges are and you want to help find a solution, all you are is a solution constructor. You're a solutions expert, and there's nothing bad about helping someone with a solution to their problem. And yeah.
I learned a long time ago, and people still don't get it today, about putting yourself in your client's shoes. Now, while there are some arguments that you'll never understand what it actually really feels like to be in their shoes, because there's going to be values that they own based on how they grew up and, you know, where they are in their current mindset and everything, that you'll never, ever get to actually that level. But there is nothing wrong with suggesting in the conversation that, look, I kind of been in a very similar situation as you are right now. And in fact, it killed me to actually have to do this, but this is how I overcame it, right? That usually helps them come out of the gate.
I would agree.
I could talk on this subject like for hours, right? Because the nuances associated with selling are really just in speaking, right? And just in having great conversations with people. It's almost, I almost feel at times it's a shame we called it something, right? That we actually called it selling and that we called it sales. It'd have been much probably better if we'd have just called it conversation, right? Conversations about getting someplace, right? What do you think?
Oh, I agree. Or what about just relationship? It's building a relationship, right? It's building a relationship. You know, it's interesting to me that, and I think that you got to play a long game versus a short game. That's the other thing. That's the big, you can't be so short-sighted to not see that the person that you met 7 years ago may not be your prospect today, but may be your prospect. And it's happened to me over and over again, that someone I never would have thought would be a customer became a customer 7 years later, right? And so you don't really know the path that you're headed down. So if you, and I've had networking calls with people where they literally are like, oh, there's no value here, let me exit. And I'm just like, one, I know that's not a relationship worth cultivating because they can't see that. They, you know, like you want to cultivate relationships with people that you know share this mindset, because otherwise they're seeing it just as a transactional equation. So I think that's like a really telling point on any opportunity that I have to network, and I'll happily get on a call with someone. If they shut it down because they don't see that opportunity, I just know, you know what, that's not exactly in my wheelhouse because that's not how I operate, right?
Yeah. Counterpoint. I actually, I'm in the midst of a negotiation on a new client and we butted heads. Bang.
That can be good.
Oh, that was so healthy. That was so healthy because I pushed so hard. I pushed back so hard that he actually gave up and said, oh my God, you don't know how much I actually needed that.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. Because, and you know, then you know you've got a real person in front of you on top of that too, right? Because, and he said, what made you tackle me that way? And I said, well, I wanted to manage your expectations because your conversation was starting to go into the, and I want this, and I'm going to need that, and I'm going to want this from you, and I'm going to want that from you. And I was going to tell you straight up, you're not going to get it.
Well, you make a huge point that it took me a bit of my career to fully understand is there is a bad client, right? But if you have a bad client, the fault is actually yours because you didn't outline the expectations up front. And if you allow that to happen and you get in that situation, you know you've done it. And there's not a lot of options once you've not managed the expectations because you've created your own kid in a candy store that's going to just take. And so I think that's like another thing in the sales process that people are afraid of. People are super afraid to outline expectations of how they will be treated and or what they're willing and what they're going to do. You must do that or you will find yourself very quickly realizing you created a kid in a candy store and you won't be able to walk it back.
That's right. Wow. Violet, I didn't realize that our conversation was actually going to be a sales clinic, but at the same time, what a fantastic set of interesting topics, all kind of hedged in this, centered in the same kind of focus. But I think it's a helpful and a healthy discussion, actually, that probably not too many people actually hear. And, what's kind of cool about this arrangement is like you and I are not afraid of each other, which is great. And therein lies a little bit of a tip too, is that you do not need to be the adversary in any situation, right? In fact, it's better not to be, right? It's like, bring them over to your side and show them how much fun, that this whole thing can be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've done that in spades today. So absolutely fantastic. And I thank you for that. I know that the listening and viewing audience is going to be quite thrilled to see more of you, to hear more of you. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how brilliant is going to be.
I appreciate that, Peter. And, obviously our Clubhouse room is always fun. So I feel like I win out on multiple fronts because we get to have these fun conversations. So, yeah.
Cheers. You see what I mean? Violet. Strong personality, extremely creative, and a great deal of fun to work with. Thanks for listening.